13 years. That's how long Lauren and I had been married as of this morning, and I felt every one of those years pressing on my chest as I sat alone on the edge of a too-firm hotel bed. It was one of those business-class joints near the airport, clean, beige, sterile. The kind of place you forget 5 minutes after checking out. I hadn't meant to spend our anniversary morning here, but the flight back from Seattle had landed late last night, and I figured it made more sense to crash nearby than stumble into our house like a zombie. Plus, I had plans. I was going to surprise her. I had a whole idea mapped out in my head: roses from the florist she liked, a late dinner at the little French place we used to go to before life got hectic. I figured I'd walk in with a smile and a bouquet and some corny anniversary card that she'd tease me about but keep anyway. It wasn't flashy, but it was us. That was the plan, anyway. The house was dark when I pulled up, no porch light, no music drifting from the windows, no candles flickering through the curtains like I half hoped for. Just quiet. That should have been my first clue. When I stepped inside, it took my eyes a second to adjust. The front hallway was pitch black, like no one had been home all day. For a second, I thought I'd gotten the date wrong. Maybe she was out. Maybe she'd made plans too. I stepped deeper into the living room, and that's when it hit me all at once. Boom. Lights. Music. People. A crowd of strangers erupted from the dark with an enthusiastic, over-rehearsed surprise. I froze like an idiot, one hand still gripping the bouquet of white lilies I'd picked up at the florist on 7th. A guy I'd never seen before clapped me on the back like we were old friends. Someone handed me a glass of champagne. And the whole time I'm thinking, who the hell are these people? The living room didn't even look like ours anymore. It had been completely transformed: white-draped tables, strings of fairy lights across the ceiling, a hired bartender mixing drinks near the kitchen. There was even a live jazz trio set up in the corner, which I only noticed because the upright bass player winked at me. It was surreal. Not like a dream. More like a play I had wandered into halfway through, and somehow everyone else had read the script but me. Then I saw her. Lauren. She stood near the center of the room, dressed in that black satin gown I hadn't seen since her friend's gallery showing 2 years ago, the one where she spent the entire night networking while I trailed behind her like a lost puppy. Her hair was curled in soft waves. Her makeup flawless. And that smile. That smile wasn't for me. It was beaming or radiant even, but it was directed at the man standing beside her. Tall, sharp jawline, blazer that probably cost more than my plane ticket. His hand was resting lightly on the small of her back, just above the curve of her hip. A hand that didn't move when he saw me. A hand that lingered just long enough to make my stomach knot. She spotted me after a beat, like she hadn't even expected me to show up. Her eyes went wide for a split second, then settled into that polished expression she wore at professional functions. "Jason," she called, like she was introducing me to a conference panel. "There you are. Everyone, this is Jason. My husband." Some polite chuckles from the crowd. A few nods. I raised my glass in some half-hearted gesture. "Hey." Then came the kicker. "This is Trevor," she said, reaching out to touch the man's arm with that easy, familiar in asterisk Macy you don't just fake. "He's my new partner at the gallery. He's the reason I've been so busy lately." Trevor offered his hand. Firm grip. White teeth. No ring. "Pleasure," he said smoothly. I took it, squeezed just hard enough to make a point. "Likewise." We stood there for a moment, awkward, tight smiles all around. Then Lauren laughed, that high social laugh she uses at openings and donor events, and turned away to grab another glass of champagne. She didn't even ask how my trip was. And I stood there, surrounded by strangers, holding a bouquet of lilies that suddenly felt like a punchline. The next half hour was a blur. Someone put a plate of hors d'oeuvres in my hand. I think a woman named Stephanie tried to talk to me about her startup's NFT line. I couldn't focus. I just kept glancing across the room, watching the way Lauren leaned in close when Trevor whispered something to her, the way her hand grazed his chest when she laughed. It wasn't just chemistry. It was choreography. I tried to get a moment alone with her, pulled her aside near the kitchen while someone refilled our drinks. "What is this?" I asked, keeping my voice low. She blinked at me like I was speaking a different language. "What do you mean? All of this? The party? These people? Him?" Her eyes narrowed slightly, lips curling into that defensive half-smile she wore when she felt cornered. "It's an anniversary surprise," she said, a little too brightly. "I thought you'd like it." "A surprise?" I echoed. "You didn't even tell me you were planning anything. You've been dodging my calls all week." She rolled her eyes. "Jason, you were out of town. I wanted to make it special. Don't make this about you being late." "I'm not late," I said, more sharply than I meant to. "I came home on the day of our anniversary." I brought flowers. I had plans. She took a slow sip of her champagne, then shrugged. Well, I had plans too. That was the moment. The moment I realized she wasn't just busy. She wasn't distracted or tired or stressed. She had moved on, I just hadn't been told yet. I watched her drift back to Trevor's side, easy as breathing. The way she laughed with him, the way he held her glass while she adjusted her hair. Like they were in sync. Like they'd done this 100 times before. I stood in the corner for the rest of the party, sipping champagne and smiling at strangers, pretending like I belonged there. No one noticed I was quiet. No one asked why the husband of the hour looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. They were too busy enjoying the show. When the last guest left and the catering crew started packing up, Lauren gave me a peck on the cheek and said, "I'm exhausted. Let's clean tomorrow." I nodded. She climbed the stairs without another word, leaving me in a room that still smelled like someone else's cologne. I sat down on the couch, bouquet still in hand, and stared at the spot where she and Trevor had stood. And that's when it hit me, I didn't recognize this version of my life. But I was starting to see the truth behind it. For the next few weeks, I tried to convince myself that I was overthinking things. That the strange dynamic I'd seen at the party was just a fluke. Maybe I was tired from traveling. Maybe I was still feeling insecure from being out of the loop. That's what I told myself. Again and again. But the truth didn't stop tapping at the back of my brain. Lauren seemed lighter after the party, like something had been lifted off her shoulders. But the odd part? It didn't feel like relief, it felt like release. Like she dropped the weight of keeping up an act and was now free to be whoever she was turning into. She started waking up earlier than she ever had in our entire marriage. At first, I chalked it up to some new resolution or fitness goal. She told me she was hitting the gym, even bought a new water bottle and some athletic gear, but when I got curious and asked if she wanted to go together one Saturday morning, she gave me a look like I'd suggested we get matching face tattoos. "Oh, babe," she said with a weird half-laugh. "The classes I do, they're early and intense. It's kind of my me time, you know? Right? Me time. Without me." I let it go, but that morning when she came back from the supposed gym session, she wasn't sweaty. Her makeup was perfect, her hair looked freshly styled, and her sports bra was barely creased. I noticed. I didn't say anything. But I noticed. She also started leaving her phone face down. Always. It was on silent too, no buzzes, no pings, just a black screen like it was dead. I only really became aware of it because she used to be glued to it, Instagram, work messages, group chats with her sisters. Now it was like the phone didn't even exist unless I was out of the room. Then I'd hear it vibrate from the kitchen or catch the glow of the screen lighting up under her hand, her fingers moving fast. I told myself not to snoop. That wasn't who I was. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband checking call logs and GPS histories. I wanted to believe we were still good, still strong. But she made it hard. One night, she left her phone on the arm of the couch while she went to grab popcorn. It buzzed, and out of instinct, I glanced at it. Just for a second. A text preview hovered on the lock screen. Last night was. That was all I saw before she swiped the message away like a magician hiding the final card in a trick. She must have seen the look on my face because she gave me this breezy smile and said, "Just Rachel being dramatic. She went on a terrible date." I nodded like I bought it. But my chest was tight. Because Rachel's name wasn't anywhere on that preview. After that, I couldn't stop noticing all the little shifts. The way Lauren seemed constantly entertained, laughing to herself while scrolling her phone, giggling in the other room. She hadn't laughed like that with me in months. When I asked her what was so funny, she'd wave me off with "Oh, just a meme. You wouldn't get it." Once or twice, I tried pressing further, but she'd either change the subject or act like I was being overly sensitive. Sensitive. That was her new favorite word for me. God, Jason, don't be so sensitive. It was like she'd learned how to *p***nice lightness. Every question I asked was met with airy deflection, like I was crazy for even wondering. I found myself second-guessing everything I said. Was I really being weird? Was I insecure? Or was I just finally seeing what had been there the whole time? One Thursday, she came home with a noticeable glow. Skin bronzed, eyes glassy, hair tousled just so. I asked where she'd been, and she told me she'd just gotten back from a gallery networking event in Miami. She said Trevor had organized the whole thing. It was last minute, but too important to miss. Miami, I repeated. You didn't say anything about a trip. She waved it off like it was no big deal. You were swamped with work. I figured I'd tell you when I got back. I didn't fight it. I didn't want another dismissive, "Don't be weird about it." But later that night, I asked if she had any pictures. She usually flooded her Instagram stories when she traveled. Airport selfies, drink pics, food sh*ts. But this time, nothing. She hesitated, just for a second. Then she said, "My phone died halfway through, and honestly, it was mostly boring panels. Nothing worth keeping." I wanted to believe her. I really did, because this was Lauren, my wife, the woman I'd built a whole life with. She wasn't someone who just disappeared into someone else's arms without telling me, right? But then came the gallery's new promotional email. A friend forwarded it to me the next day. It featured a photo montage from the Miami event. There was Trevor grinning next to two donors. There was the gallery's booth. And then there was sh*T of Lauren, standing beside Trevor in a white sundress, sunglasses perched on her head, smiling like she was in a travel ad. The email didn't mention Jason, didn't say she was married, didn't even hint at anything outside the gallery. I told myself it was nothing, that I was making something out of nothing. But then, another moment, another signal. We were lying in bed one night, both on our phones, her screen turned toward the wall. I rolled over, half asleep, and muttered something dumb like, "Remember when we used to talk before bed?" Not accusatory, just wistful. She didn't even look up, just said, "I'm tired, Jace. Not everything's a thing. Not everything's a thing." That line stuck with me, because the more I thought about it, the more it felt like she'd been dropping breadcrumbs. Clues. Or maybe not even hiding it anymore. Maybe she'd moved on emotionally and just hadn't told me because she didn't want to deal with the fallout. Maybe this Trevor guy, this perfectly dressed, perfectly confident gallery savior, wasn't just a business partner. And maybe I wasn't supposed to find out yet. Or maybe I already had, and I was just pretending I hadn't. The hardest part wasn't the suspicion. It was the waiting, the long, drawn-out uncertainty, the ache of watching someone you love drift away from you in real time, and feeling like you're the only one who notices. At some point, I realized we hadn't had a real conversation in weeks. We still said good morning, still exchanged texts about groceries or the thermostat or bills. But anything real, anything honest or raw or meaningful, gone. One night, I asked her, just flat out, "Are you happy?" She blinked, caught off guard. "What?" I repeated it. "Are you happy, Lauren?" She looked at me for a long moment, then gave me this tired little smile and said, "I don't know. I think I'm just figuring things out." I nodded. "Are you figuring them out with Trevor?" Silence. She didn't deny it. She didn't say yes either. She just got up, muttered something about needing to check her email, and left the room. That was the moment I realized I was no longer part of her story. I was just a footnote. It happened on a Sunday. One of those slow, gray afternoons where even the walls seemed tired. Lauren had just finished making tea and was humming softly in the kitchen. Some jazz tune she picked up from Trevor, no doubt. He'd mentioned in passing once that he collected vintage records. She wasn't humming for me. We were supposed to watch a movie. That was her idea. Some attempt at normalcy, maybe. I picked out a thriller, something neither of us had seen, but she'd barely looked up from her phone since the opening credits. I pretended not to care. I always did. Halfway through the movie, she excused herself, said she was going to take a quick shower. "Long weekend," she called from the hallway. My shoulders **ling me. I paused the movie, sat in silence, and then I looked at her phone. I didn't plan to. I want that on record. I didn't sit there with some scheme in my head or moral high ground crumbling under suspicion. But when her phone buzzed for the third time in less than 10 minutes, face down on the coffee table, I cracked. Curiosity, maybe. Desperation, definitely. She hadn't changed her password. Same 4 digits she'd always used. Either she forgot to lock it or she didn't care if I saw. I still don't know which would have been worse. I didn't open messages. I didn't check emails. I went straight to the Photos app. Something told me the truth would be there, not in texts or call logs, but in the images we keep. The ones we don't even realize we're taking. At first, it was mundane stuff. Work screen **TS. Art show flyers. A picture of a latte in front of a gallery window. Her face in the reflection. Then I tapped into the shared albums folders connected to her cloud storage, organized by event. One of them was called Gallery South Tour. I'd heard her mention it before. That was the trip to Miami. The cover image was harmless, a sh*T of the hotel lobby with a sculpture installation in the background. But what was inside? That's where everything shifted. The third image down showed a beach. A secluded stretch of sand, all golden light and shadow. And there, in the center, Lauren. Her feet in the tide, that white sundress again, hair blowing in the wind like something out of a magazine. She was smiling. Not the half-smiles I'd been getting for weeks. Not the polite ones reserved for donors or neighbors. This was real. Radiant. Full of something I hadn't seen in her for months, joy. And beside her, no, behind her, was him. Trevor. His arms around her waist, face pressed to her shoulder. The angle was candid, almost in asterisk mate. Like someone else had taken the picture to capture a private moment. And maybe they had. My breath caught. The caption read simply, Golden Hour Sunrise. There were no tags. No comments. No geotags. Just a timestamp that matched the exact weekend she'd gone to Miami and claimed she didn't take any pictures because her phone had died halfway through. I stared at it for what felt like forever. The sounds of water running in the distance. The faint squeak of a bathroom cabinet opening. The reality setting in like fog creeping across a windshield. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't storm into the bathroom demanding answers. Maybe a stronger man would have. But all I felt was cold. Empty. Like my heart had finally accepted what my brain had been screaming for weeks. She wasn't mine anymore. No. Worse, she had already left. I'd just been too stubborn, too naive to see it. I stood up, walked slowly to her bedroom, and opened the closet. Took out my suitcase, the one I used for work trips. I started packing without thinking, just letting muscle memory guide me. A few changes of clothes, my laptop, the folder with financial documents I'd been meaning to move to digital. Downstairs, the water shut off. I zipped the bag. I didn't leave a note. Didn't slam the door. I didn't even take the lilies from the anniversary bouquet, now dry and crumbling in their vase on the dining table. I walked out the door with nothing but a duffel and a heart that felt like an empty room. Not broken. Just hollowed out. Like something sacred had been stolen and replaced with silence. That night, I checked into a small studio apartment above an antique store on the east side of town. The kind of place that smells like old wood and rain. The landlord didn't ask many questions. Just handed me the keys and said, "Welcome home." I didn't correct him. It was the first place I'd been in months where Lauren's name hadn't come up. Where the shadows didn't remind me of someone else's laughter. I liked it for that reason alone. Over the next few days, I moved on autopilot. Unpacked. Bought a second-hand coffee maker. Set up a folding desk in the corner and pulled out an old laptop, one I hadn't used in years. Back when I was still excited about side projects. Back when I believed I could build something that mattered. And that's when I remembered it, something I'd nearly abandoned, an encryption platform I'd started developing years ago during late nights and long weekends. Back then, it was just an idea. Yeah? It felt like a lifeline. Something I could pour myself into while the rest of my world stopped making sense. The code was still there. Untouched, forgotten like everything else I'd once loved. I got to work. Nights turned into mornings and I barely noticed. The glow of the screen became my anchor. I refined the system. Built new protocols. Filed for provisional patents. Registered an LLC using my middle name and a P.O. box. I even found a firm in Austin interested in licensing the core of what I'd built quietly, privately, with zero connection to my personal life. And most importantly, I made sure the software was legally bound to me alone. No shared assets. No marital entanglement. I set up a trust to hold the licensing rights routed through an independent shell. Not out of pettiness, but out of necessity. Because I knew Lauren. And I knew this wasn't over. She hadn't asked about me yet. No texts. No voicemails. I figured she was giving it time, either to come up with a narrative or wait for the Trevor situation to stabilize. But eventually, she would notice the bank statements, the redirected mail, the missing files from our shared drive. And when she did, she'd come looking. But she wouldn't find what she thought she was owed. Because for the first time since this all began, I wasn't reacting. I was planning. And she had no idea what I'd already taken with me when I walked out the door. Not clothes. Not money. Something more powerful. Control. And now I had no intention of giving it back. The first week after I left felt like detox. Everything slowed. My brain, my body, even my breathing. The noise that had followed me home every night. Those subtle shifts in Lauren's voice, the looks, the omissions, the silence, finally stopped. No more guessing games. No more decoding half-truths. Just me, in a too-small studio with walls that creaked and a heater that coughed to life in the mornings like it had just remembered how. And I was okay with it. There was a strange freedom in being nobody. No calendar reminders about couples' dinners. No phone calls from mutual friends who were just checking in, but really fishing for gossip. I changed my number, blocked her on everything, moved my savings into a private account. My presence in Lauren's world became a memory before she even had time to process that I'd gone. I poured everything into the encryption platform. Days blurred into nights. I skipped meals, forgot to shave, drank more coffee than I should have. But it felt good, like I was making something real again, something I could control. Every line of code was a rebellion. Every file I saved was a declaration. I'm not the guy you left behind. The software had always been ahead of its time. I'd started working on it 5 years ago, back when data breaches were making headlines and every tech company suddenly cared about privacy. Most of them were bluffing, patching leaks and calling it innovation. But I wanted to build something airtight. Not S*XY. Not flashy. Just unbreakable. I'd let the idea rot when the gallery started taking up Lauren's nights, and she needed me to pick up the slack at home. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, just a side project. But deep down, I knew I'd traded something important for the illusion of stability. Now I was reclaiming it. I reached out to a few old contacts, people who owed me favors or at least remembered my name from tech meetups back when I still showed up to things like that. One guy in Austin, a friend of a friend type, ran a firm that specialized in secure data architecture. I sent him a cleaned-up demo of the platform, stripped of personal metadata and quietly branded under the new LLC. He called back 2 days later. "This is solid," he said. "Like scary solid. What's the catch?" "No catch," I told him. "Just tired of watching people lose control of their own information." He laughed. "You sound like a manifesto." I smiled. "Maybe I am." Within a week, we were negotiating a licensing agreement. Nothing huge at first, a limited-use partnership with the option to expand based on performance. But it was real. It meant lawyers, contracts, deadlines. It meant the code I'd written in silence was now worth something on paper. I filed the trust documents the same day. The LLC, registered under my middle name, was already in place, and I made sure every piece of ownership flowed through a legal tunnel Lauren could never trace back. I paid the extra fees. I used burner emails. I sat in a lawyer's office with peeling wallpaper and a flickering light bulb overhead and signed papers that made sure this thing, whatever it became, would be mine alone. Because I knew how these things went. Lauren wasn't stupid. She'd seen enough estate plans and gallery fundraising agreements to know how to read between the lines. If she caught wind that I'd built something valuable after our separation, she'd try to argue it was community property, joint marital effort, some nonsense about supporting me emotionally while I created it. But this wasn't about emotion. This was about numbers, timestamps, dates, cold, hard evidence. And I had it all. I'd backed up everything: emails, development logs, prototype schematics. I even had **TS of early commits with file signatures from 3 years ago. I documented the gap where development stopped, right around the time Lauren got promoted, and where it restarted the day after I left. Legally, it was bulletproof. Morally, I didn't care anymore. She'd already cashed out her side of the story. The champagne smiles, the golden hour photos, the subtle, gutting betrayals. This was mine. My turn to start over. And I wasn't about to let her rewrite the ending. The funny thing was, I didn't miss her. Not really. I missed the version of her that existed before Trevor. Before the gallery. Before she started looking at me like I was an obligation instead of a choice. But the woman who sent me "Red Heart You" texts while wrapping herself in someone else's arms on a beach in Miami? No, I didn't miss her. The silence of the studio helped. There was no Wi-Fi when I moved in intentionally. I'd been using my phone as a hotspot when I needed it, but mostly, I kept myself unplugged. No news, no feeds, no shared photo memories from 8 years ago popping up on my screen. Just code, coffee, Repeat. I added a few personal touches to the space. An old desk lamp from a thrift store. A vintage typewriter I'd found in the antique shop downstairs. I wasn't writing a novel, but something about the weight of it comforted me. Like it was reminding me that permanence still existed, even if people didn't. I wrote a note to myself, taped it to the mirror. You already survived the worst day. Now build the next one. I lived by that. Each day I made the platform cleaner, stronger. I hardened the encryption, added new redundancy layers, stress-tested it against every hack scenario I could think of. I was obsessive, but I had to be, because part of me still expected the hammer to fall. I figured Lauren would notice something eventually. The bank withdrawals. The missing data from our joint cloud. Maybe she'd try logging into my old workstation. Maybe she'd see the contracts roll in. She had her ways. She was resourceful. But by the time she noticed, it would be too late. I'd already changed the locks. Digitally and otherwise. She texted once. Just once. 2 weeks after I left. It read, "I hope you're okay. I miss you." I stared at it for a long time. Not because I believed her. Not because I thought it was sincere. But because it was proof she finally realized I was gone. I didn't respond. The next day, I filed an update with the licensing firm. An optimization package that improved system speed by 12% and minimized the risk of remote injection attacks by 18%. They responded with a formal acceptance and a counteroffer. Increased revenue sharing in exchange for full integration over the next fiscal quarter. I said yes. Quietly. Clinically. And when I pressed send, I realized I hadn't thought about Lauren all day. Not once. And that was the first real victory. It didn't take long for Lauren to catch on. I got the first hint when a mutual friend, one of those gallery-adjacent types who always acted like our marriage was a quirky performance art piece, sent me a message. "Hey," it read. "Just heard Lauren's looking into your business stuff. Everything okay?" I stared at the screen. Business stuff. 2 weeks earlier, the licensing firm in Austin had announced a small PR push around the encryption platform. Nothing flashy, just a press release tucked into the middle of a quarterly newsletter. My name wasn't on it, only the LLC. But Lauren was nothing if not thorough. And resourceful. She must have connected the dots. I didn't respond to the friend. There was nothing to say. But 3 days later, the legal notice came. Delivered to my studio in a crisp manila envelope. Hand-delivered by a process server who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I opened it slowly, half expecting some kind of cease and desist. Instead, it was a formal petition filed with the court. Lauren was claiming that the encryption platform, my platform, was community property, subject to equitable distribution under the terms of our pending divorce. Pending. We hadn't even filed yet. My stomach turned. I sat on the floor, surrounded by legalese, rereading the words I thought I'd safeguarded myself against. Lauren's claim was strategic, cold. She cited vague, collaborative influence on my work, suggested her emotional support and marital partnership were integral to the platform's development. The nerve of it made my jaw tighten. Her attorneys, yes, plural, referenced a few publicly available indicators. A small address error in one of the provisional patent filings that still pointed to our old home. A utility bill linked to the LLC that had come through during our final month together. Nothing substantial, nothing damning, but enough to create the illusion of overlap. That was her game. Make just enough noise to drag me into a negotiation. Hope I'd be scared enough to settle. Hope I'd still care enough not to burn everything down. She didn't know me anymore. My legal team was small, quiet, brutal. I'd already hired an attorney, a guy named Feldman I found through a colleague from a past freelance job. He specialized in tech law and business separation. Soft-spoken, sharp-eyed, and ruthlessly precise. When I handed him the envelope, he read it once and calmly said, "She's bluffing. She'll come for discovery," I warned. "She can try," he said. "But we're going to be ready." We were. Over the next 2 weeks, Feldman and his associate built the foundation of what would become the Counter-Strike. We pulled every commit log, every server backup, every encrypted timestamp from the platform's development cycle. Code signatures, geolocation metadata, Even the VPN logs I'd used while developing from the studio. Everything pointed to one simple truth: this platform didn't belong to us. It belonged to me. But what really changed the game was the digital forensics. Feldman had suggested hiring a specialist, a freelance security consultant who dissected metadata like it was DNA. I thought it was over***LL. Until it wasn't. Because buried in the server logs was something we hadn't expected, an unauthorized login attempt that originated from a strange IP address, one that matched a commercial-grade Wi-Fi network registered to the same building as Trevor's co-working space. The attempted access failed, locked out by the platform's self-triggering encryption layers, but the timestamp was revealing. It happened just 2 days before Lauren's attorneys filed the claim. Coincidence? Maybe. But legally? That kind of metadata told a story. We compiled everything, created an audit trail, built a dossier of digital fingerprints and timelines that placed the platform's development firmly outside any shared marital timeline. Then Feldman filed a motion to dismiss. He didn't just ask the court to deny Lauren's claim. He included a formal request for sanctions on the basis of bad faith litigation. Essentially saying, not only is this claim baseless, it's malicious. A calculated effort to harass and extract under false pretenses. The court date was set within a month. Lauren showed up in a gray suit she probably borrowed from a friend who still took her seriously. She didn't look at me. Not once. Trevor wasn't there. Probably smart. His name never came up aloud in court, but his fingerprints were all over the situation. Her attorney tried to argue that Lauren had a reasonable belief she was entitled to equity based on the history of creative collaboration in the marriage. Feldman's response was clinical. "Your Honor," he said, adjusting his glasses, "we have logs of every significant development related to the platform. Timestamps, server records, digital security trails. None of it overlaps with the plaintiff's timeline. In fact," he turned to the screen, "we've identified a failed login attempt tied to a network associated with a known personal associate of the plaintiff." That same week, she initiated legal proceedings. The judge raised an eyebrow. Lauren's lawyer shifted in her seat. In short, Feldman continued, this isn't about creative rights or emotional contributions. This is a post-facto attempt to claim a piece of something she had no hand in building. The judge didn't call for a recess. Didn't even look at the gallery. She leaned forward and said, "I don't see any legitimate basis for the claim. The request for sanctions is under review. For now, this case is dismissed." Just like that. It was over. Lauren didn't speak as she left the courtroom. She kept her head down, hands clenched. Her attorney muttered something to her as they walked past, but I didn't hear it. Feldman patted my shoulder. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, better than okay." But what I didn't say, not to him, not to anyone, was that I didn't feel victory. I felt numb. Because somewhere in my head, I guess I thought she'd stop. That she'd realize what she'd done, maybe apologize, maybe even let it die quietly. But instead, she***p***nized the wreckage. Tried to carve something valuable out of the ruins she helped create. Like our marriage was some expired business contract and she was clawing back sunk costs. And what scared me wasn't that she failed. It was that she tried it all. That night, I went home and opened my laptop, not to work, but to write something down. Something private. Something for me. She wanted the benefit of my healing without taking responsibility for the injury. It felt good to put it into words. A quiet truth. The kind that doesn't need a courtroom to make it real. The dismissal spread fast. I didn't think it would. I assumed it would all get buried under gallery news and local gossip, the way uncomfortable things usually do. But apparently when someone like Lauren, polished, curated, highly visible, gets publicly shut down in court, people talk. And in her world, silence can be louder than scandal. The local arts community began to drift away first. Not dramatically. Just quietly. A few canceled showings. An RSVP that never turned into an appearance. Donors stopped returning her calls. Her gallery's social media posts started getting fewer likes, fewer comments. Then the investors pulled out of a planned exhibit, citing strategic redirection. Strategic? That was a word Lauren used to use all the time. Back when we were a team. She kept up appearances, of course. Her Instagram was still a polished grid of filtered gallery light, wine glasses on marble, and captions like, "Start where you were seedling." You wouldn't know anything had happened if you didn't look closely. But behind the scenes, people were stepping back. People she'd once charmed without effort. That's the thing about a reputation, it doesn't need to be shattered to be broken. Just questioned. And she couldn't spin this one. She had come after me and she had lost. Publicly. Legally. Cleanly. I didn't say anything. No posts. No rumors. Not even a vague tweet. I kept building. Quiet, focused, grounded. That's what she never understood. There was power in restraint. In not reacting. In letting her shadow box with her own regret while I simply moved forward. Weeks passed. Then, one night at 2:13 a.m., my phone buzzed. I was awake, staring at the ceiling like I did some nights, not angry, just sorting. I glanced at the screen and saw her name. Not a call. Not even a short message. It was a wall of text. A long, emotional letter poured out in fragments and apologies and what-ifs. I never meant for it to get this far. I was confused. Lost. I thought I could handle it quietly, that we could somehow find our way back. But everything moved too fast. And now I don't even recognize myself. I keep replaying the day you left. I should have stopped you. I should have said more. There was more. You know me better than anyone ever will. Please don't throw that away. I still believe in us. I still believe we could start over if we just. I stopped reading. I let the message sit there, screen glowing in the dark, her voice in my head sounding more like a memory than a plea. And then I archived it. Not because I didn't feel anything. Not because I wanted to punish her. But because I had nothing left to say. Nothing left to give. The story had already written its final chapter. The photo on the beach, the party in our home, the courtroom, all of it told me what I needed to know. And her message, for all its emotion, came from someone still trying to rewrite a version of the past that never existed. She had already moved on once. Now it was my turn. And this time I wasn't looking back.